Of this progress, sustainability cannot be just about local. Just yesterday, I read a report, I bet a lot of you saw it, it was big in the news, that the global ice sheet could be completely gone in the summers in as little as 4 years. Climate change is not just a reality, it stands to be the defining moment of modern society. Our time frame from shifting our economy from this myopic obsession with fossil fuels towards a more peaceful, sustainable paradigm is growing shorter. And so while we can and must put our best efforts into creating the local world we want to live in, we also have to engage in this national dialogue, in this global dialogue, in helping to ensure that our governments put us on a path that is not so dependent on the fossil fuel economy. We are compelled to engage in every opportunity we have to build peace, to build a sustainable world that we want to live in. Ashland is doing this in a number of ways. We're taking a stand against genetically modified crops in our community. Yay! We're increasing our renewable energy portfolio. And so while national level politics is pretty discouraging these days, we simply can't afford to let our elected leaders ignore the pressing environmental issues that are currently receiving short shrift due to our economic woes and problems abroad. In fact, addressing many of these environmental problems could, in fact, help our economy if our leaders would only embrace this change as opportunity rather than to clinging to old, outdated paradigms. At its heart, sustainability is about how we humans can live in better harmony with the natural world that sustains us all, while still creating a high quality of life in our communities. It's both global and local, dependent upon our individual commitments to making responsible decisions and upon the power of the people to ensure that industry and governments also commit to making those same decisions. After all, nothing is sustainable if we don't have air to breathe and an atmosphere that is conducive to life. So in closing, I would like to encourage everyone listening to deepen your commitment to sustainability and community cooperation. Do what you can. Drive less. Bike and walk more. Grow and share some of your own food. Join a community-supported agriculture program. Buy less, and when you need to make a purchase, look for used, recycled, high-quality local stuff. Shiny and new is not always better. Through making this personal commitment to building the better world we want to see, I hope that we can all find hope, inspiration, and ultimately peace. Thank you.
Stephanie alerts us to what we know, that there are so many ways that we can be peace builders in the world by our consumer choices, our carbon footprint, as well as joining organizations to advocate and demand public policies that foster human solidarity. But there is a particular kind of peacemaking that the next people on the program do. It is just standing and witnessing to what you care about. Even when that's lonely, even when people who go by pay no attention to you, they also serve who only stand and wait. Women in Black.
International Women in Black. For peace, against war. Every Friday from 12 to 12:30, and the first and third Saturday from 11 to 11:30 on the plaza, Women in Black Ashland stand. And we have been joined today by Women in Black Medford, who on every Wednesday from 12 to 12:30 stand in Vogel Plaza. Ashland, Oregon Women in Black stand for peace with their sisters around the world. We invite all of you to stand with us, male, female, young, old, dressed in black or not. We ask only that you stand with us with peaceful intent. Women in Black is a worldwide network of women committed to peace with justice and actively opposed to injustice, war, militarism, and other forms of violence. As women experiencing these things in different ways in different regions of the world, we support each other's movements. An important focus is challenging the militarist policies of our own governments. We are not an organization, but a means of communicating and a formula for action. Women in Black vigils began in Israel in 1988 as a protest against Israel's occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. These vigils for peace began to spread around the world. Although each vigil is autonomous, we are united by our commitment to justice and a world free of war. Women in Black has been awarded numerous peace prizes throughout the world and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. Please join us if you feel so moved. On Fridays here on the plaza, 12 to 12:30. First and third Saturdays on the plaza from 11 to 11:30, and in Medford, every Wednesday from 12 to 12:30 at the Vogel Plaza. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley Patton, and all the women in Black. This is a UN-sponsored observance. In Medford, the United Nations Association of Southern Oregon took the lead. Gary Wheeler, the mayor there, read a proclamation yesterday at the Medford City Council. And tonight at 6:45 at the United Church of Christ congregation in Medford on East Jackson Street, there will be an interfaith program about peacemaking in the world's religions. Here in Ashland, there is a UN club at SOU, and to talk about the work of the UN club is its president, Evan Lastly.
Hello. So, as the United Nations Club at SOU, we do educational events and outreach focusing on international issues and national issues which we think are pressing to our time. In the last 2 years, we've held forums and potlucks on the educational system in America with professors and local high schools brought in to talk about how we can reform and make it a good environment for students to engage. I think education is a fundamental aspect of peace and has to always be remembered. We need to think critically about the world that we live in, and that is the only path forward to an understanding of the world so that then we can act, so we can make informed decisions about what kind of world with peace we want to see. So, together with local members of the Baha'i community earlier last year, we got students and community members involved with the local chapter of Amnesty International, calling for Iran to defend the right to higher education for Baha'i and many other religious minorities in Iran, and had successful campaigns to release political prisoners there. And Amnesty International we will continue to work with over the next couple of years, and it's very important that we stand up for all victims of political persecution around the world for standing up for what they believe in, who they are, and all nations must respect those human rights. We have to work together to create that kind of environment where we have a high standard. So as residents of cities and towns, each of us is interconnected to one another. We are all part of a community. As citizens of nations, we enter into a social contract with one another, a bond which unites our fates in a common destiny, in times of peace and in times of war. And so as nations do we enter into this bond with other nations in such a way that no man is an island, and no nation is an island, except for those nations that are islands. And each one of us is connected to this global community where what we know, what we say, and what we do really does fundamentally matter. And small acts can reverberate around the globe. On December 17th, 2010, a young man in Tunisia set himself on fire. In the spring of 2011, in recognition of their own rights, people overthrew their dictators. Millions of people demonstrated against authoritarian rule, injustice, and inequality. A great process of change has begun in our time. For many, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 signaled such a fundamental change, the end of a violent and terrible century of war, which cost the world so much. As the United Nations came to be, new safeguards have been pursued to prevent such things from happening, from having war on a worldwide scale. Globalization has unified markets around the world and created relationships of codependence among nations, interlocking economies in such a way that the costs of war between major nations would be unimaginable. And yet there have been tremendous costs for this system, both for democracy and basic human dignity. War, rather than appearing in direct conflict, has taken the form of vast inequalities in both political power and economic self-determination within societies around the world. People rose up against their tyrants for democracy, for justice, for freedom, for self-determination, apart from both corrupt rulers and outside entities, other nations interested in utilizing those nations' resources for their own gain, undemocratically. I watched the uprisings throughout the Middle East. As the United Nations Club, we held community forums on the movements, and I began to reflect more deeply upon the state of affairs in the United States and Europe. The Global Commission on Elections, Democracy, and Security recently released a report citing the United States as an example of a failing democracy, stating, quote, "The rise of uncontrolled political finance threatens to hollow out democracy everywhere and rob democracy of its unique strengths." Our financial system is increasingly unstable, and efforts to deal with the breadth of its weaknesses has damaged democracy. This, along with the reality of climate change, as has been said before, and political stagnation, has led to rising nationalism in many countries and the dangers of a wider war between nations. We must remember that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. And we must be actively involved to prevent war. If we are to create a peaceful future in which human needs are met without the specter of oppression or war, the future belongs to those social movements from Iran to China, from Egypt to Spain, from Greece to the United States, which have peacefully demonstrated in hopes of inspiring a larger movement, an international movement for peace and justice. Peace demands a partnership between nations based on mutual goodwill and brotherhood. This perhaps is the idea of the United Nations, but it must be people-driven. This will not come from non-governmental organizations. It will come from social movements. It is our responsibility as global citizens to create that future, to imagine a future capable of overcoming the challenges we face as a civilization. Join together with your faith communities, with your civil organizations, your local businesses. Engage, especially, with those who disagree with you, especially in your own country. And one of the things, many of you know I was involved in the Occupy Wall Street protests. Perhaps you can hear it in my voice. And we did outreach and reached across the aisle to members of the Tea Party and began a dialogue. And I know some of the people who participated in that were present. I think the important thing to emphasize is that we must not assume that certain people are enemies or that they disagree with us ahead of time. We must partner and be open to dialogue. That's peace. We must seek a world built upon human cooperation rather than competition. And in building that future, we may discover a sustainable path forward as a community of nations. Thank you.
At times, religion has been a spur to violence, but that was not the right understanding of the religions. In general, religious denominations, faiths, are committed to peace and peace building. And today, the religious congregations in Ashland are represented by several people who have a special bond because 7 very interfaith denominations sponsored a peacemakers camp this summer for children. I think it was from 6 to 13. I'd like them to come on stage. These are people who represent those congregations. Leslie Bagnell Marks, who is a minister at Rogue Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation. This is Dorita Borgeson, who is minister at First United Methodist Church. Representing the South Mountain Friends Meeting, the Quaker group here, is Bob Morris. Joanna Neiman is a member of the Congregational Church of Christ here in Ashland. And Eileen Dunn, I'm not sure. Oh, and Eileen Dunn is part of the Buddhist community that was one in. And thank you so much for being here.
My sisters and brothers who are clergy leaders and people of faith, or people who have a spiritual practice, or people who claim to follow whatever ethical guideline calls to them, we all know that each human being is precious and sacred, and we know that each human being has tendencies towards violence, towards having that "I just want to kill him" thought. We also know that we have the capacity within us for deep compassion, for deep understanding, and for peace. And so we come together as religious people, as spiritual people, as ethical people to seek that capacity within us and build it. And we want to start with our children. And so an Interfaith Peacemakers Day Camp came together as a vision and then a reality this summer. And Dorita was central to that. She will tell you more about the experience those children had.